cute meme of Trump and the shake, and the caption is, Bonesaw's a drinking game.
She's got to get well. Okay, as soon as Kim gets here, we'll... And here she is, okay. We are turning from closed session, reconvening to open session. May we have a roll call, please?
President Black,
Here.
Vice President Stapleton Gray,
Here.
Board Member Blanchard,
Here.
Board Member Clark,
Here.
Board Member Trutain, here, Student Board Member Weinstein,
Here.
and Student Board Member Mala.
Here.
And for those who wish to participate, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. Reading of the AUSD mission and vision statement.
The mission of Albany Unified School District is to provide excellent public education that empowers all to achieve their fullest potential as productive citizens.
AUSD is committed to creating a comprehensive learning opportunities in a safe, supportive, and collaborative environment, addressing the individual needs of each student.
Thank you. In closed session, the board voted to deny an appeal for an interdistrict transfer. Next, we have the agenda. Does anyone want any changes, modifications to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, can we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda.
We have a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We next have a recognition of a long list of our highly valued fundraising groups.
Thank you, President Black, trustees, and I'm actually going to go over to the other microphone. Good evening, school board, as well as members of the audience. It is always a pleasure to recognize the fundraising groups and the people who work tirelessly all year to raise funds that supports our students and our programs in Albany schools. And so every year, we like to recognize our fundraising groups as well as our PTAs. And this is just a very small token of our appreciation, but we have a certificate for each of our fundraising groups. And so I'm actually going to ask our board president to come down here with me. And then when I call you up, if you could please remain up here because I do want to take a picture because it goes on our website. So I'm going to ask President Black to please read the certificate. Each certificate will say the same thing.
Okay, this is a certificate of recognition awarded to the Albany Athletic Boosters in honor of your commitment and dedication to the students of Albany Unified School District. We extend to you our warmest regards and sincere appreciation.
And is there anybody here from the Albany Athletic Boosters? I would like to ask Board Member Trutain to come and accept this on behalf of the Albany Athletic Boosters because she is very involved with our athletic program, which means you have to stay up here.
Actually, I am a booster, but I don't represent them.
Ah, okay. All right. You want to do the next one?
Okay, this is for the Albany High School Parent Teacher Student Association.
There's somebody from Albany High School PTSA? Okay.
Albany Music Fund. Albany Rotary Club. School care. No one here from school care? Okay. Marin Elementary School Parent-Teacher Association. Albany Middle School Parent-Teacher Association. Ocean View Elementary School Parent-Teacher Association.
But the principal is here. Oh, no, principal is not here yet. Okay.
Cornell Elementary School Parent-Teacher Association. Albany Performing and Fine Arts Boosters, our newest group. Albany Education Foundation. Albany Community Foundation.
And all the boards stand up. Yes. And can you set it? Ah, perfect. Can you make it?
I keep saying that.
It's just something. No, like when the board can see things.
Oh, yeah, scrunch together. There we go. Okay, we'll get my 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I saw it.
Just want to add that without all these fine people and all the hard work you do, we would have fewer programs at our schools. Kids would have a less fulfilling educational experience, and it would be harder for us to meet our mission. Anyone else like to comment? Charlie?
Well, I just wanted to add a personal thank you, and maybe just to note that this is really about doing what's best for students, and so thank you for helping us do that.
Yeah, I wanted to thank all of the organizations and the leaders, and also want to thank all of the parents and community members who actually donate the money. It's great to have the organizations that help get the word out there about how important all these programs are, but for the actual people who pull out their checkbooks, and I'm sure you guys do as well too, but thank you to everybody.
To make it unanimous, I would also like to add my thanks, and I want to encourage everyone and motivate them for next year, because I think everybody in the room knows that we're facing budget cuts, and to have these energetic fundraising organizations that can bring in very much needed funds to keep programs alive for kids will be even more important in the coming years. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank you on behalf of the students. We don't take it for granted, so thank you.
Thank you.
Nice.
Okay. Next on the agenda is the consent calendar. Do we have any questions or comments or items to pull from the consent calendar? If not, can we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move we approve the consent calendar.
I second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Board and superintendent reports.
Thank you, President Black. In my report tonight, I would like to bring your attention to the screen. At the September 25th board meeting, the AUSD board passed Resolution 2018-1904 in support of the City of Albany's declaring November 11th through 17 as No Hate Week in Albany. Over the past few weeks, the Mayor McQuaid, director of UC Village, and I have been collaborating on a joint project to show the award-winning documentary Near Normal Man. Charlene Stern is the daughter of Ben Stern, who was a survivor of the Holocaust. And as you can see on the screen, this is a deep personal story about racism, and it's how he defied the forces that sought to destroy him. He is a survivor not only of several concentration camps, but also 2 death marches. Charlene, Ben's daughter, is the producer and director of this documentary, and she will be coming on November the 16th from 6 to 7:30 at UC Village. We've planned this event for a showing of the documentary, and then Charlene Stern will hold a question and answer session afterwards. The target audience is for high school through adults, and while there is no child care, there are children's activities that will be provided at the UC Village. So this is a collaborative effort, not only with the City of Albany, UC Village, and Albany Unified, but also the Albany Community Foundation. Everyone donated a little bit of money. UC Village is providing the venue, the staff, and Charlene is very excited to be coming. Kim and I got a private showing of the documentary. I don't know if you wanted to add to this.
I did, just because I had the opportunity to pre-screen this, and it is so good. I mean, I can't wait to see it again. I'm going to bring my entire family. Really, this should be a standing room only event, because this is a really, really excellent documentary film.
What time?
It is from 6 to 7:30 on November 17th. I'm sorry. Yes, 6 to 7:30. And we will be advertising this. The mayor is going to announce it, as well as get it on their electronic version. UC Village will be advertising it as well. And I've actually asked Kim to help me with putting together some narrative that we can put out to the AUSD community.
Perfect. Thank you. Other board members, anything to report? Charlie?
So it's been an active 2 weeks or so, and I'm having to look at my calendar to remember the events. But I wanted to give a shout out to the Ocean View PTA for organizing a parent information session on the construction project, which was well attended and I think appreciated by everyone. Also, the high school design team has been meeting to consider some of the cost implications of that project, and that work is proceeding. The Budget Advisory Committee has been meeting and putting in some hard work, and I look forward to hearing their report when it comes. And I just wanted to mention 2 other events that have occurred in the last couple weeks. On Saturday, the Ocean View Fall Festival was very festive, and there was just a really nice atmosphere there. It was a real community-building event. And on a sadder note, I do want to mention that I attended the memorial for former Superintendent Marla Stevenson this past Saturday, and there were quite a few people from Albany there. And it was good to hear about her life. We were invited to a celebration of her life, and it was indeed a celebration.
Glad to hear it. I was out of town, but I wish I could have been there. Michaela?
Yeah, I wanted to recognize and acknowledge the hate speech that was scrawled on the walls of Albany High School 2 weeks ago, not this past week, but the week before. On it were the words written out, F word, N words, free Hitler, get out of our country, and a swastika equals good. I think that definitely as a school board, we don't have full control over people's expressions of their anger, but I think that as a school board, we do have some control over the education that we provide to our students, and I know that not all students received comprehensive Holocaust education. I didn't have an in-depth education about World War II or the Holocaust until 10th grade. While hate speech begins as early as kindergarten. So I wanted to commend certain teachers that I've had that really went in depth and explored those topics, because I think that when you don't do that, we have results like we saw at Albany High School these past 2 weeks. So Miriam Walden was my world history teacher. She did a really amazing job of exploring that. And then also the English department had the 10th graders read Night this past year, which was also a really profoundly horrible memoir, but really important to remember. And it was difficult to read and also very important. And efforts like Near Normal Man being shown in our district, I think that's also really important, but we need to make these things mandatory, and we need to have them from very young ages, not at 10th grade. And so I just wanted to commend those teachers who do a really good job of going in depth about these issues. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I have the normal report. So at AHS, Homecoming Week started yesterday, October 22nd, and each grade will compete against each other this week in a series of events throughout the week to win the title of Homecoming Champion. And the Homecoming football game will be held this Friday, October 26th at 6:30. For AMS, the first dance of the year for 7th and 8th graders is from 7 to 9 on November 2nd, and the Black Parent Advisory Committee meeting will be held at 5:30 on November 6th. At Marin on November 7th, Marin Morning will be held at 8:30 a.m. and Family Night will be held at 6:15 p.m. At Cornell, the PTA International Potluck will be held at 5:30 to 8 on October 26th. Ocean View, as Charlie mentioned, hosted their Fall Festival and Walkathon on Saturday, October 20th, and will celebrate Unity Day tomorrow, October 24th. And the elementary schools will all host their annual Halloween parade on Wednesday, October 31st. At the Children's Center, they will have their Unity Day tomorrow, October 24th, and Community Sing at 10:15.
Thank you. Kim?
I attended the Ocean View Walkathon and had a really great time. I just wanted to, it's been mentioned before, but I wanted to point out that this year there was a dunk tank, and it's never that warm in Albany, and Principal Jorgensen and a number of the teachers were willing to sit in the dunk tank and have parents and kids, throw the balls, and they got dunked a lot. And I think it was a really wonderful show of community spirit that they were willing to step up and do that. There were a few 8th graders also that finished the day by being dunked, and I will say that my 8th grader was one of those, and it was well worth the cost of the balls to dunk my kid. Yeah.
Thanks. Jacob?
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly talk about the wellness committee that I'm on and Kim's on, and we're supposed to be getting together pretty soon, but I want to highly advocate for us to go ahead and get a survey out to the public for the later start times, especially in light of the governor vetoing the bill. It's been brought up, and I had asked quite a while ago to please get a survey out. I kind of hinted on which way I'm leaning, but I didn't want to move forward without getting input from the community. So I don't know who the request would be to, but I would like us to move forward as soon as possible so we can actually vote on it, and depending on the results, implement it next school year.
Thanks. Anyone else? I know, again, I was out of town. I couldn't be there, but I know there was a walkthrough of the middle school annex. Charlie, you want to comment on that?
Well, both Kim and I had an opportunity to do that. I don't know if you want to add anything, or it was really fun. There's some great spaces taking shape there. I think one of the most exciting things to see was the teachers from Ocean View who will be teaching there next year were part of that, and they were very pleased with what they saw. This is so much bigger than my classroom. And of course, what they were looking at in the new middle school annex was simply standard-sized classrooms compared to the current undersized classrooms. So it's looking very nice.
Thank you. Okay. I think, Audrey, you pretty much already gave the student board member report, but is there anything to add?
I don't think so.
Okay, good. And we'll move on to persons to address the board on matters not on the agenda. Is everyone here to do that? Okay, seeing none. Move on to the first staff report, or I guess it's tonight's only staff report, on the 2018 Smarter Balanced Summative Assessment results.
Thank you, President Black. Trustees, I'm going to turn this over to Marie Williams, who is our Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment.
Good evening, Superintendent Williams, Board President Black, board members, community. Tonight I am going to briefly, so I'm going to watch the clock, I'm going to briefly share some information about the Smarter Balanced Assessment results for our district for 2018. I want to start here by sharing with you again the California School Dashboard. This is as a way to remind us that in California we are measuring the quality of schools using a number of local and state indicators. Many of these we became familiar with last year and in prior years when talking about the development of the Local Control and Accountability Plan. This year you may notice that there is a new local indicator. I won't spend time on it this evening, but I will let you know that this year we're going to be reporting also on providing students access to a broad course of study. So that will be a fifth local indicator that you're going to hear about on November the 13th. This just was some information about the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress System and the many assessments that make up KASP. Tonight we're just going to talk about Smarter Balanced. There's an English Language Arts assessment and a mathematics assessment. You'll see that writing, listening, research, and inquiry are components of the overall English Language Arts score. Concepts and procedures, problem solving and modeling, and data analysis and communicating reasoning are components of the overall mathematics score. Just for folks maybe who this is their first experience with Smarter Balanced, students receive one of 4 overall performance levels: standard exceeded, met, nearly met, or not met. And I just talked about the claim areas on the previous slide. Students get a scale score, which is not as useful as it was in the days of CST when 350 meant you were proficient, and so we were shooting for that. The scale scores are different now by grade level, so that information is basically sort of useless. Although we do use it to calculate distance from standard, which is the number of points between the scale score and the minimum needed for standard met. I will say that, moving from the old testing system to Smarter Balanced, the overall sort of the idea is that we're focusing on growth. So you'll see some slides that show performance over time. I think we're still struggling as schools and districts to sort of not get stuck in just talking about students meeting and exceeding standards, which you're going to see on the next few slides. But I think as we continue to analyze this data, we want to look at sort of all of the performance levels and, what can we identify in terms of patterns in order to be able to support students. This slide, I think, is important in terms of talking about how SBAC is useful and how it's maybe sort of limited. We certainly get to identify patterns in performance and underperformance and determine steps for action. For me, my favorite one is the second one, and this is a work in progress for us. And so this is the idea that we assess a lot throughout the year, and so we're not waiting just for the Smarter Balanced results to tell us if students made growth or not. That really maybe the Smarter Balanced reports scores would validate what we already know, having assessed students throughout the year. So that would be a way that we might think of Smarter Balanced assessment scores being useful. We do also use the results to identify target students for intervention here in the district. The data comes to us after students have already gone to the next grade, so we can't go back, pull them back into the previous grade and implement intervention. So in that way, it's sort of a post-mortem. In the old testing days, the assessment was tied explicitly to standards, and so we could target instruction to some degree to those standards. We don't have that in terms of a blueprint for SBAC, so we sort of are teaching all of the standards, but not necessarily knowing which ones will be assessed, and certainly it wouldn't be all of them on this Smarter Balanced assessment. A challenge for us in terms of talking maybe publicly about some data sets is that some of our student groups are fairly small, and so we can't report those numbers publicly. I will tell you that as a district leadership team, we have looked at grade level cohort data disaggregated by ethnicity, but in the interests of not potentially disclosing students' identities, we have not brought that for you here today, but we are looking at that. And then just the idea that this is one test that measures performance one time. And again, sort of with the California School Dashboard, we are moving to a model where we're looking at many ways to measure student success. So here are some scores. What you have in the top box is how we performed on Smarter Balanced in English, Language, Arts, and Math compared with the county and then compared with the state of California. So you see we well outperform both Alameda County and state of California, so that's to be celebrated, I think, in the first place. And then you will see below that our performance over the life of this assessment, basically. So last year was our 4th year of students taking the Smarter Balanced assessment. You'll see that there are, the trend line is not constantly moving up, but in general there is increase over time. One of the board members noted the drop from 2017 to 2018 and asked if we sort of had any ideas about what that might be, and I would say not yet. We haven't, I don't think, done enough analysis, and also our tools are fairly basic. So we have data available through CDE, we have data available through TOMS, but we don't have a powerful assessment system yet that will allow us really to sort of do the kinds of disaggregation that would be important for our conversations here in the district, but we're working on it. Because 2 points don't make a trend, I have for you here, Paul, I'll remember those words forever. I do have for you here, with the exception of last year's 3rd graders who took the assessment for the first time, every student who has taken the test, every grade level of students who have taken the test, these are not the exact same students, but you can see sort of the growth or decline or sort of what that pattern looks like. There was a question about comparing this data to state of California, so I did prepare and highlight for you in blue the comparison to California trends. You won't have much time to look at it right now because I'm almost through my time, but I will be sure to maybe provide that in the Friday update, and maybe we can put it on the website, so if the public wants to take a look at that. So again, here you'll see sort of initially growth, and then from 17 to 18, a dip in performance. But you'll see that the state comparisons are sort of all over the place. So in some ways it's sort of helpful, and in some ways it sort of confounds our own results. So I would say we probably would need some more time to dig into not just the trend line, but then also looking at claim level data, and I think really sort of digging into our student group data at a particular grade level. A board member asked a really good question about being able to filter students sort of in multiple ways. So can we look at students by ethnicity and disability status? And the answer is right now no. So the CDE report allows us to look at performance by ethnicity and then also filter for economic status, so students who are or who are not socioeconomically disadvantaged. But that's the most that we can get in terms of being able to filter students in multiple ways. And I think we would be really interested in sort of looking at our different programs of students, which I'm going to go to here. So on your left, what you will see is the performance of all students over a period of 4 years, and then you'll see the performance of student groups represented, not all of them, but sort of the highest numbers. You'll see that I've added 2 or more races. That's a student group that's been growing and that we haven't always included when we look at data, but we will be moving forward because, again, that's a group that's growing in size. Then on your right, you're going to see, and this is for English Language Arts, on your right, you're going to see all students, and then you'll see students identified as socioeconomically disadvantaged, students with disabilities, and English learners. These are our 3 groups of unduplicated students targeted for the purposes of local control and accountability plans, so I did want to show them to you there. But these are 2 separate graphs. So when you look at the data by ethnicity, that also includes students who are and or are not socioeconomically disadvantaged, and or students who do and do not have disabilities, and students who are and who are not English learners, if that makes sense. So we've just separated it out to just get a couple different looks at that. So you'll see both for English language arts and for math, we do have some student groups that are persistently underperforming when compared to peers and or the all student group. And again, I think we would want to do some additional looking at those student groups and at that data before we could make any sort of definitive claims about reasons for why that data is the way that it is. But certainly we are spending time with our principals looking at this data frequently. And as we move into developing single plans for student achievement, which seems a far way off, but it's not, you're going to see that there's a lot more data, a lot more achievement data sort of built into those. And so this conversation will continue through the development of, they're now called school plans for student achievement, not single plans for student achievement. So that's one change. So in terms of next steps, we want to continue to look at this data. I like to think that these results provide us an opportunity to start a conversation. I don't think this is the end. I think it's the beginning in terms of looking at this data and identifying sort of ways to use it to guide our instruction. We do want to continue to talk about and think about implementing progress monitoring tools. So be that local assessments, which we have many of at the elementary level in particular, and certainly at the secondary level. And then also looking at the implementation of an assessment platform that would let us look more closely and more strategically at the data that's provided to us on this and other assessments. Professional development is one of our LCAP goals. Academic intervention in a number of ways, as well as socioeconomic intervention, is another goal, not represented here, but is a goal. And then continuing to support district-wide parent engagement efforts. I think it's really important that we remember that this is a community effort, right? And so that we involve parents in the education of their children. That's all I have for you this evening, briefly.
Thanks. We have questions. Charlie?
So thank you. Again, another nice report. If you could go back one slide, actually. That was actually, yeah, go back to the graphs. Thanks. It was my question about could we disaggregate the data a little bit further? And I just wanted to say something more about that, in that if you look at the graphs on the right, there's some fairly large differences. The graphs on the left, maybe not quite as large. And what prompted my question was thinking that every student's just as smart as every other student. And if we look at a graph like the one on the left and we see differences among ethnicities, is this really a function of the fact that maybe some students are burdened with a disproportionate challenge from learning English, and maybe their families not having the financial resources to afford enrichment programs or special kinds of activities during the summer when they make further gains? That the more fundamental concerns for us are how do we address the disparities we see here? And you know, I think pretty much in any kind of statistical comparison, it's common to control for the influence of multiple factors. If you're trying to make a comparison between groups, you want that to be an apples-to-apples comparison. So you need to even out the differences by as you mentioned, as Marie mentioned, by filtering the data so that you have true comparisons. So, for example, you might be comparing ethnicities after removing the population of English language learners. Okay. So I was interested in your response that you don't have the software to do that, which is truly amazing to me, in that that is pretty standard kind of a pretty standard kind of query to be able to either select if a group does not have certain characteristics and then make the comparison, or do the multiple filters. So I was reflecting on that and thinking, what do we need to do as a board to give you the right kind of software so that you could do the kind of analysis that might actually inform the actions that we need to take?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. We are right now assembling a group, a team that would work with us to pilot some tools that might be used. And then my goal is to bring something in the spring for adoption. So in terms of what the board might do, it would be say yes when I bring that approval, I suppose, if I can say that. Yeah, that's what we're working on, to be able to look at the data again more strategically, so that we're not downloading sort of massive queries and then doing very sort of rudimentary hiding of things, and then I don't know if I got that right. No, did I control for the right group yet? So there's sort of a lot of that. It's pretty clunky right now and maybe not super reliable. So I think we're wanting some streamlined tools, so they'll be coming in the spring for your approval.
So maybe just a follow-up to that is, are you currently limited by the kinds of queries you can do, say, online at the Department of Education webpage, or do you actually have independent standalone software that you can use here to dig into the data a little bit more?
So we are looking at this data in 3 places. The first is CDE, which is the most broad sort of overview. That's where you're not going to get reports of student groups that are less than a certain size. So CDE is one area that we go to. The other is the data comes to us from CDE, and it's loaded into a system that is maintained by KASP. It's called TOMS. It's a test operations management system or something. And so that's where we can dig in and look at those smaller student group numbers. But there we're still not able to filter for more than one group. In fact, CDE is right now where you can filter for more than one. It's limited, and in TOMS you cannot do that. And then the third system that we have is ARIES, which is our student information system. And so that's where we get basically all of the raw data that we are able to reflect on the dashboard. But those tools would be very cumbersome for us to sort of do the kinds of analysis that you are suggesting that we do with a high degree of accuracy, I'll say.
So my last comment, I guess, is if I may just put in a suggestion that those are all education software. And I think it might be useful to look outside the world of education software. Pretty much any kind of standard statistical analysis package would allow that kind of digging into the data in more depth. You know, whether you're talking about a more sophisticated package like SAS, or even something simple like Microsoft Access will do that kind of thing. So I think that we've run into this on a number of occasions, that there's very specialized tools for education applications, but I'm not sure we need to limit ourselves to those tools. Maybe something that's used in the commercial world would actually allow us to make more progress.
Assuming they're giving us the data in some sort of a standard data.
Yeah, that is the question, are the data available in a standard format? But it doesn't even have to be that standard, as long as you can have your own standalone database. You're not just reliant on what's at CDE.
Thank you.
Other questions? Kim?
Can you go back to the slide where you had the, I think, cohort C? Is that me? Okay. Yes, this is it. I just wanted to bring people's attention to the 2017 grade 5 data for the state. So that would be the number in blue. So that number indicates that in 2017, only 23% of the 5th graders in the state of California were meeting standard. That is a failure on the state of for the state of California in educating its children. Can you go back to the first slide where we had the county and state data? I'm concerned about all of our children. And when you see information like that, that now 50% of students in the state are meeting standard, that means that 50% are not. And in math, it's 60% that aren't at grade level. I want to just energize our community to think about things that we can do to help improve education throughout the state. And part of that is, a big part of that, in my opinion, is to fund our public education systems. So we need to encourage Sacramento to give our schools the money that they need to hire teachers so that we can teach these kids.
Thanks. Others? I have a couple of questions. First, when we learned that the SBAC was coming some years ago, we were told this is an adaptive test. If the kid can't answer a question, the next question might be a little bit easier, and this would dig deeper into where they were having problems. So that's on the individual student level. Are we getting that data for individual students?
No.
So it doesn't seem very useful if we can't know what it is.
Right. So basically what we get in terms of student level score is the scale score. And then we get a claim level score and an overall score. So we don't get something like this fifth grader performed at a level equal to that of a seventh grader, right? We're not getting that information. That student would exceed standards, right? So we're not getting that information, no.
Right, but in terms of interventions, it would be very helpful to know exactly which standards a student was having a problem with, and we don't get that information.
That would be very helpful. We don't get standards level information, so beyond the claim level, there's also target level information, which is not quite standard level information. It's a little bit broader. And again, we don't have the software right now to even really be able to look at target level data, but there are some tools that allow us to see where students performed sort of at or below or around this sort of approximately at the level of the grade level on targets. So that is as sort of deep as this data goes right now. So it's limited in terms of sort of using this as the only measure to determine how to intervene with students. We need some other data points to be able to.
We definitely need other data, but it's just interesting and disappointing that it's not providing what it was promised to provide. And I have another, this kind of a question, but I know you can't answer it. But we talk a lot about the achievement gap for ethnicities or certain groups, but there's another huge achievement gap we have seen every year on the SBACs and the tests that preceded them, all standardized tests. Statewide, nationwide, the kids always do better in English language arts than they do in math. Is this because our standards are too high in math, or is this because we're failing to teach math effectively? And boy, I'd love to know the answer to that, because year after year, test after test, you look at right there, AUSD, Alameda County, State of California, English language arts, higher than math. This isn't true for all individual kids, but as a statistical average, it's always true.
And yes, you're right, I cannot answer. Neither will I attempt
didn't expect you to be able
answer
to.
that question. As a former English teacher, I will not try to answer that question about mathematics for you.
Yeah, but it's interesting, and you know, in the increasingly technological world we're in, this is an aside, but I was visiting friends in Philadelphia. The first cold day of the year, they turned on their heat and it didn't work. So they had to call the plumber to come to try to fix their furnace. Well, you think a plumber is a, manual laborer, a tradesman. Well, they were debugging the computer in the heater, right? There are hardly any trades left anymore that you don't need a mathematical and computer background to work in. So everybody needs to do better in teaching math to these kids. Thanks. Anyone else? Anything from the audience? Thank you very much for that report. Oh, sure, come on up.
Sorry, I have a question. Mayor Castillo-McIntyre. Is it possible to also include a comparison of the school districts that are performing best in California for each of the items? Because, well, it's great to see that Albany is doing great against Alameda County and the state. If those are low bars, I would prefer to see how we stack up against the best performing, so that's our target.
Great question. You can actually go onto the state website and see that, but
Yes.
we could report on that too.
Yes. So there are two ways that you could see that. Every year, the LA Times actually produces a searchable list that you can look at sort of who is at the top performing for English language arts and mathematics on Smarter Balance. So that would be one resource I'd be happy to pass along to you if you want to give me your contact information. And then the second is to go onto the CDE website, where you can look at statewide results, and then you can look at every single district in the state of California. But you don't get a preview, so you don't get information about look at this districts if you want to see the top 10 performing. If you were wanting simply to look at sort of how we rank compared to other districts, I would use that report that's published annually. Be happy to share my information with you.
Great. In fact, can we get that on that district website?
Of course.
Thanks. Terrific. Okay. Moving on. We have some review and discussion items. The first is an amendment or a change to the Board Governance Handbook on the annual reorganization of the board.
Thank you, President Black. On July 20th, 2018, the governor signed Assembly Bill 2449 into law, and this extends the date to the second Friday in December by which a newly elected member of a school district governing board, county board of education, or community college district governing board is to assume office after the election. In previous years, we have done this at our first board meeting, our only board meeting in December, because we could do this by the first Friday. So this new law now moves the bar by 1 week. And existing language in our board governance handbook says that the annual reorganization of the board says that their first regular meeting in December, the board elects the president and vice president. And we hold our agendized school board meetings on the second and fourth Tuesday of the month. So we miss the threshold by 3 days because we only have that one board meeting in December. And so I'm bringing this to the board because the annual, our governance handbook says it's the first regular meeting in December. So I'm bringing it for the board to determine if the board would like to revise the existing language to reflect the provisions of AB 2449, as well as to make any additional revisions. And what you see on the screen is suggestions that were made by the board, and you can see them in red and underlined. And I will be able to, hopefully, actually type on this document to track any changes that we make.
Okay. Do we have any questions or suggestions from the board?
Well, I'm a little bit unclear. Are we talking first about at which meeting, we're going to induct our new board members? So are we talking about perhaps changing the December meeting to being 1 week later, or are we talking about this reorganization of the board? I'm not sure what our...
Well, it's actually both. The assumption is that we're not changing the December meeting, but that the new members will be inducted the first meeting in January. Mm-hmm. And they kind of need to be inducted before you vote for the president.
Before you...
So it's kind of both. Yeah, that would be another change, a different change if the board wanted to change the first, the only meeting in December to Friday instead of Tuesday, or to the following Monday or Tuesday, in order to accommodate the new law without waiting until January. Jacob?
I just want to throw out there that if someone has been elected, like on November 6th, and they have to wait almost 2 months to be seated, I know that's why we're having this discussion. I think it's an awful long time for someone who's campaigned very hard to have to wait to be seated.
No, I agree with you. It's a long time. In effect, it's really just skipping one meeting, but it is a long time. It does feel odd.
Yeah.
Charlie.
You know, that was my first reaction, too. I mean, it still is my reaction that it does seem like a long time between the November election and January, 11th or 12th or whenever that would be. On the flip side, the argument I can think of that is in favor of the language we see right here is that we receive our first interim budget in December, at the December meeting. And my observation over the years has been that it's very difficult to take your seat at the December meeting and then have to vote on the budget for the first time as you are now a board member. And so since we have a first interim budget in December and a second interim budget in February, it does make a certain amount of sense to me, like the current board takes responsibility for the first interim budget, and then the new board members have enough time to then be able to vote on the second interim budget in February. So that was the only argument I could think of that made sense here in terms of this language.
Jacob.
So I'm still a little confused. If you could go back to the prior page, please. So under the background and information, it says that the governor's extended to the second Friday in December. Are we allowed to then go into January?
It says it has to be after that.
It has to be after that date. You can't do it before that date.
Okay. So in our situation where our board president is termed out, so the December meeting, are you still...
Yeah,
are you still a board member, even though your term is up? Is Val going to conduct the
I'm still a board meeting, still a board member until the new board is sworn in, so it would extend my tenure by one meeting.
I'll let some other people jump in. I just think it's an awful long time for a newly elected member of the community to wait.
Well, I mean, presidential inauguration is the 20th of January. We get a 2-week jump on that.
Right, but I'm not talking about the presidential election. I'm talking about Albany.
Well, so as a practical thing, let's say that Charlie and I are defeated and Paul is termed out. You've got 3 people who've never been on the school board, who have probably not yet read the Brown Act guide, who have probably not read it all that much into the budget yet. They absolutely could be out there campaigning hard. I don't expect that they're not attending board meetings. I think giving them a month and a half to read up on the job is well worth doing.
Kim?
If we were to move our December meeting to the third Tuesday, that would be the 18th of December, then we would be able to induct the new members. But I don't like the idea of changing to a Friday meeting. I think that's too much of a change, and I think that is, especially in the month of December, it would be difficult on families and members of the public to attend. And the 18th, I don't know, I'm floating that out there, but I also think there's barriers to that. Our January meeting is
The 8th.
Is the 8th, after all of the holidays, after New Year's.
When does winter break begin?
Winter break begins on the 24th this year. So Friday, the 21st is the last day of school. I would be content to wait until the January meeting to swear in new members and to reorganize the board. But if other board members feel like December the 18th makes more sense, I'm willing to go with the majority of the board.
Charlie?
So I think I need clarification on a couple points here. One is, I believe you have to have the new members sworn in at a regular meeting, not a special meeting. Is that correct? And so what we would have to do is we would have to declare that our regular meetings in December take place on either both the second Tuesday and the third Tuesday, and effectively add a regular meeting in December. We could do that. We could change our board schedule because we set the board schedule for regular meetings. We could say that the regular meetings are the second Tuesday and the third Tuesday of December. We could say that the regular meeting is the third Tuesday. But then that leads me to my second question, which is, because we have to adopt the first interim budget at the December board meeting, what is the date that we have to submit it to the county?
15th December.
The 15th of December. We cannot have a meeting on the 18th. You know, our only choice then would be...
To have an extra meeting.
We have to have an extra regular meeting. We can't have an extra meeting that's a special meeting, because that wouldn't accomplish the purpose. So.
Yeah.
It sounds like the January induction and reorganization makes the most sense. I would be very interested to hear from our new board members later, in the new year, about how that worked for them, to see if we need to make a change in coming years.
You know, Jacob, when I first heard about this, my reaction was, you mean I need to serve an extra month? I really agree with you about it, but I think as a practical matter, it's just difficult to change this one meeting for this purpose, and it really is just one meeting we're talking about.
Yeah, and that's fine. This is under review and discussion, so we don't have to decide tonight. I'm going to do a little research on the Assembly bill. In that first section, I didn't hear the word that it has to be done before or after that date.
After that.
I just want to make sure it's clear that we're actually doing what an Assembly bill tells us to do. I don't have a problem extending it back to January. Well, I do a little bit, but I definitely have a problem if we're not looking at the language carefully enough. Because when I read it, it's still not clear to me if we're allowed to go back into January.
Yeah, when the reason this came to my attention was I get legal advisories that come out every month, and this was flagged as an advisory that you can't do it before that particular time, which is why I brought it to the board.
Okay, so can we check the actual language of the Assembly bill and make sure we're in conformance?
We can go into, sure.
Okay, so I'm considering the tenor of the discussion tonight. We'll bring this back at the next meeting, not on consent, but in review and action, so we can have an actual discussion about it. Is that what the board would like to do?
There was other language as well, since it was in this piece, and this does reflect a conversation that this board had in a previous board meeting, that is in the first bullet, about prior to the nominations, that each board member should make known whether they would like to be willing to retain and assume office, and that had to do with the fact that new board members coming in were not able to have that conversation because it was at a previous meeting traditionally.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right, the handbook used to say at the meeting before,
Yeah.
but that's a problem if the new board members haven't been seated yet. So this just says prior to the nomination, so that would mean at that meeting, there'd be one round where everyone would say what they were willing to serve as, and then the vote, rather than just going straight into the vote.
Yeah.
That was the intent.
So I just wanted to recognize that there is a rationale for stating that explicitly, for taking your time and letting people talk about whether or not they would be willing to do that. I can think back to the way it used to be done is it was a little bit like the Wild West, and who was the fastest draw? The first person to put their hand in the air made a nomination. So I think this provides a little bit more measured pace and allows people to talk about it.
Thanks. Okay, so we'll bring this back at the next meeting and review and action. And that brings us to an actual somewhat related board bylaw, meetings and notices.
Thank you. Our AUSD board bylaws 9320. Can you get us to the? Okay, thank you. Can you hook that? Okay, thank you. So Board Bylaw 9320 is about meetings and notices. And the last time that this this bylaw was revised was in 2012. And there was a request to bring this back to look at, sorry, bear with me.
There it is.
That's it. Thank you. And this had to do with meetings of the boards. Let's see if I can get this. There again were suggestions on, that was made.
Farther down.
Further down, and it's right there. Okay. And so this is to clean up some language, but also the last time it had Albany Community Center, so we changed the language to Albany City Council Chambers, and we said, or at a time and place agreed to by the Agenda Committee, because there are times when we do meet at Cornell, the multipurpose room, for some of our board meetings. And in December, there's only one regularly scheduled board meeting, and in July, there are no regularly scheduled board meetings because in July, we don't schedule them. So this also came from some board suggestions, and so it's here for your review.
Yeah, I need to comment that what you see on the screen is not exactly the same as what's in the agenda packet, because Charlie was sharp enough to notice that the old wording, which was written when the council chambers were under construction and we were meeting at the community center, had the first and third Tuesday and said the Albany Community Center. So to bring it up to date, it's now the second and fourth Tuesday, and it's the city council chambers. Also, the other wording that is in your board packet was, or at a time and place agreed to by the agenda committee, because we have had to move the meeting. Example, I think our next, one of the meetings in November is going to be at Cornell School. Occasionally, this chamber isn't available, or we need to move the meeting because of a holiday or something. So the agenda committee has the power to move a regular meeting, and that needed to be noted in the bylaws. Charlie?
So just maybe one obvious comment is that if we were to decide that we should have 2 meetings in December, then that sentence there would need to get changed. I don't know if we're going to decide that or not, but
Yes.
we get to write our own bylaws, so.
And if the board does decide to have 2 meetings in December, the board can either give me direction to just automatically make this change, or I can bring it back to the board for approval again if you wish.
Well, this needs to be brought back for a vote anyway, and should we bring it back on consent and pull it from consent if we want to make that change, or should we just bring it back and review and discussion along with the handbook? What's your
Review and action, you mean?
review and action? Sorry, along with the handbook. What's your?
We could bring both back as review and action.
Okay, let's bring them both back as review and action, and just deal with them as a package. Kim?
I just wanted to make a comment about the red text regarding special meeting. I'm very pleased by that addition. I know that came out of a board discussion earlier this year, and that gives any member of the board, the opportunity to call a meeting under special circumstance, as long as there's some agreement. And that wasn't in place before, and I think that it's a very good option because sometimes there can be, urgent situations where we would want to meet, and having one board member feel that it was really important, I think, would influence the rest of us to agree to that. This makes that possible.
Yeah, thanks. The wording in Ed Code is a little ambivalent about how that happens, so we just tried to make it a little more specific in our policy. Okay, are we ready to move on? Anyone want to comment on this from the public? Okay, next up is a discussion about an evaluation instrument for the Board of Education's self-evaluation. And the idea here is, if we can, I mean, we are supposed to evaluate ourselves every year, according to our policy. It makes more sense to me for the current board to do the self-evaluation. Once the new board is seated, they won't have been serving for the previous year, so it doesn't, for a self-evaluation, it seems like they could criticize us, but that's not the same thing. So hopefully we'll get to this before the end of the year, if we can agree on an instrument. So there are some, CSBA has a poll. You can pay them, and they will provide it and score it for you, or we can just use it as a model and create our own. And the board has been provided with, I think the last time we did it was in 2012. So you have what we used at that time. A couple of times the board has taken articles describing what an effective governance team does, and has just gone through the article and decided whether we were doing that or not. It's a less formal kind of way of doing this. If we do the poll, the procedure that we used was that each board member filled out the poll, and then after briefly congratulating ourselves on things that everybody agreed we did well, we looked at, because there isn't time in any normal meeting to go through 100 different possibilities, but we looked at either items in which everyone agreed we were doing poorly, or items in which there was a wide discrepancy where one or two members thought we were doing great and others thought we were doing terribly, to see if we could reconcile what the conversation was about. Those are, and of course we're open to any other suggestions. So, does anyone have opinions about this? Charlie.
I'd be interested if you would like to say something about why the last one of the CSBA type evaluations was done in 2012. Since I've only been on the board since 2014, I didn't participate in that, and you must have had a reason for not continuing.
The reason was that Ron Rosenbaum didn't like that.
Well, that's a good reason.
I mean, really, honestly, that's the reason. He just didn't like those polls and didn't think it was a good way to do it. I liked it. I thought it was effective. But the entire board should agree on what the instrument is. And if one member of the board didn't like it, then we looked for something else.
So what I was intrigued by is, it's not in the board packet, but you sent us the results from 2011 and 2012. And it's pretty interesting that in 2011 and 2012, the board gave itself C's and D's for community leadership, which was just interesting to see.
This is not a new issue, yes.
It's not a new issue, yeah. And there were some, the board gave itself some A's and B's, but lots of C's and D's scattered around other places. It had 59 questions in it. It does provide some opportunity to dig in on a lot of categories.
Yeah, and of course we can always add our own custom questions if there's something you'd really like to see asked. I'd be glad to go through this and try to help create an instrument based on this, or not. Jacob?
Yeah, I'd like to look into it, but 59 questions is just
Too many?
way too many, in my opinion.
Okay. Kim?
I like the idea of evaluating ourselves. I think that would be useful. You just offered to go through the 59 questions and sort of maybe one thing that we could do if we did a initial cut, of things that each of us felt were really not interesting and not useful, and gave that to you, then you would have a short list of questions to work with. Would you find that useful, or do you think that you can determine that, do the first cut yourself?
Sure. I mean, if you want to say, don't ask this, or here's a new one, sure. And in partial answer to Jacob, to you saying that's too many questions, it's definitely too many to discuss, but hopefully there will be a much smaller number that'll come out that will be ones that we'll want to discuss, where we either give ourselves very bad grades or there's a wide discrepancy, and we don't have to talk about the others.
I would just say thank you, Paul. I would appreciate you going through this and devising an instrument for us.
Okay, so does the board want to take this approach with the poll?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I note that there are 11 major categories, and you might be able to simplify it or shorten it a bit by picking 2 or at most 3 for each of those major categories.
Or maybe not as many categories.
Yeah,
Sure, I'll try to winnow it down.
some are more
Yeah.
probably relevant than others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, to start off. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
I have a clarification question. When would you like this brought back?
How about the second meeting in December?
No, I think the next meeting, I think we're going to have to jump right on this in order to, we need to agree on the evaluation instrument, and a review and action, and then the following meeting, or in a special meeting, we have to have the actual self-evaluation. So as soon as possible, which means you need to bug me. We will need help from an administrative assistant or secretary in order to actually create the poll and collate it. And I know we're shorthanded now, but any help you could give us, because it's one thing for me to go through and strike things out, but it's something else to actually create the instrument. Mm-hmm. And then when we get the results from the board members, they need to be collated.
So short of having my executive assistant, the duty falls to probably the secretary of the board, and that would be your superintendent.
Well, hopefully you can find someone down there.
I'll work with our director of technology to see if we can put something together.
Thanks. Jacob?
So are we evaluating ourselves as individuals and then evaluating the board as a whole?
Oh, each individual evaluates the board. We don't evaluate ourselves as individuals.
Okay.
And by the way, this is really, it's a board self-evaluation, but it's really the leadership team evaluation, so the superintendent should participate.
What about student board members?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Good. That brings us to the plan for elementary temporary student housing. I expect there's some interest on that topic in the room.
Got it? Can you put the first slide up, please? Thank you, President Black, members of the board. What I would like to do tonight is to take you through the plan for temporary elementary student housing, and I'm going to ask the board's indulgence in letting me get through the first 8 slides. So explain there are 14 slides, and slides 2 through 7 are an overview of the options that I've considered. Slides 8 through 14 will revisit those options and explain the advantages and challenges of each option. And then I've added slides 11 through 12, which is going to provide information on cost for options 1A, 3, and 4. And I'm hoping that I can do this correctly. It's this button. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, just for anybody who's, watching or new to the district, can you just give a
Yes.
word or two of background about why we're doing this?
Yes, that's on my notes of this first slide. Actually, I'll go back to this one. So currently, the Albany Middle School project is scheduled to be completed in January 31st of 2019. The Albany High School project is scheduled to, I'm saying hoping, be open sometime toward the end of 2019. Ocean View right now is undergoing the design build process in terms of planning. And then Marin Elementary School will be the fourth of the 4 rebuild renovation projects. So in order to do the renovation rebuild of starting with Ocean View, we will need to temporarily house students during that construction period. And so site and district administrators, we've been discussing this issue since last spring. We wanted to start early and give us time to look at several different options, as well as to look at some of the challenges that each option would provide us, as well as to look at some of the advantages. So we looked at the myriad of details that it takes to move a school. And what we want to do is to make sure that we provide the educational services and as well as supplemental services to our students. And so I came up with a set of 4 criteria. And some of this criteria is information or feedback that I've received from some members of the community, as well as some feedback that when we did the town hall meeting on the budget previously, there were some comments that were added in there. So by no means is this from every member of the community, but I came up with 4 criteria. One is to keep Ocean View and Marin students in Albany schools. And the second is to maximize our bond funds for our school construction projects. We want to keep before and after school care in Albany, and our staff who provide services to also stay in Albany as well. So let me get through the next four slides in terms of the options, and then I'll go back and talk about the advantages and the challenges. Option 1 is to have students move to our other AUSD schools, and that means transitional kindergarten would be at the Albany Children's Center, and they would have an AM/PM schedule. Kindergartners from, in this case, Ocean View would go to Cornell and Marin and have an AM/PM schedule. Grades 1 through 3 would go to the Albany Middle School Annex, and grades 4 and 5 would remain at Ocean View until the Albany High School New Edition is made available and is ready for students. Option 1A is a little bit of a hybrid. It would remain keeping our transitional kindergarten students at the Albany Children's Center. It would put our kindergartners in portables, keeping an early bird, late bird schedule. We'd place the portables at 2 potential sites. One would be Ocean View Park, and the other is an existing school site. Grades 1 through 3 would still go to AMS Annex. Grades 4 through 5 would go to Albany High School when the high school is ready. Option 2 is to postpone Ocean View construction for 1 year. We would wait until Albany Middle School and Albany High School projects are completed and are ready for student occupancy. We then could revisit option 1, option 1A, and possibly options 3 and 4. What option 2 does is it buys us some time. Option 3 is to build a portable school. 5th grade would remain in the OV 5th grade wing. We would put kindergarten through 4th grade in portables at Ocean View Park. And we're looking at about 16 portables. Option number 4 is to lease a school site. Hopefully we could do this in a nearby town. We would need to look for a school that is suitable for kindergartner through 5th grade. We would need to lease this school for about 4 years, and that would be to accommodate both the Ocean View and Marin construction. Option 1. Now, the advantages and challenges are by no means completely exhausted. These were just some of the ones that, were the most that came up when I discussed with staff. I also had the opportunity to sit with a parent for about an hour and discuss some of the concerns and challenges. So one of the advantages is there would be no transportation costs. We would not be busing students. It is close to before and after school programs. Our students would stay in Albany. It does save our bond money for construction. If you did the AM/PM schedule at Cornell and Marin, it would open up one classroom at each site for before and after care. Now the challenge is that space is going to be very tight. We would be using every available space that we have for classes as well as for before and after programs. Supervision for our students who are going to the high school, because they would be using an area Memorial Park, we would probably need to hire a campus supervisor to provide supervision. Our support programs and services are going to be very tight. When I talk about support services, I'm talking about such services as intervention, English learner services, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech. Parent drop-off and pickup times and the traffic is going to be tight in, I would say, pretty much option 1 or option 1A. It's going to be tight. And the school community events, one of the things that was raised is it's going to be a challenge when you have students are at 3 different sites to keep that sense of community and to have school community events. Option 1A does have some advantages as well. It retains the early bird, late bird schedule for our kinder students. Now, when I say it minimizes parent drop-off and pickup, I don't mean that it minimizes it to nothing. It just means that it's a little bit, it prevents a little bit of an ease. And that's because you'll have about 50 additional kindergartners that would not be going to Cornell and Marin unless you put the portables on an existing school site. The challenges are the cost of portables, and you'll see that in a slide that is coming up. Students possibly would be at 3 sites as they go through their next few years. If the portables are placed at Ocean View, the students will be adjacent to construction. So I'm very mindful of noise, I'm mindful of air quality, dust. Support staff will have to travel between sites, for example, PE. That I there is a slip of my finger typo. If we have additional portable at another site, there is, of course, an impact to traffic. There's a loss of PE and play space. So, for example, if we were to drop portables at Cornell, there would be a loss of blacktop space. And again, school community events is a challenge when you move students to different sites. Option 2. The advantages for that is that both AMS and AHS will be completed and ready for students. We would not be concerned about any additional potential delays to Albany High School. It's not as much of an issue for Albany Middle School because they're scheduled to be ready for student use by the end of January. Even if there were a postponement, it would not affect the students moving in. But the high school, it would. So if there were any additional delays at the high school, delaying for a year would give us a little bit of a buffer. Another advantage is Albany Middle School would be able to use their building. They'd be able to use the annex. Some of the challenges. If Albany Middle School moves to their new building, it's really hard to give up classrooms when you've moved into your new classroom. We would have to store the new AMS furniture while Ocean View and Marin students occupied it because it's smaller furniture. And there are 4 existing portables right now that are on the Albany Middle School staff parking lot. Those 4 existing portables would have to remain or maybe move to another site so that when the Ocean View students do move over to that site, the AMS students have the 4 portables to go to. Okay, before I get to option 3 and 4, which, if you remember, is creating a portable school, the cost per portable and the dollar amount that you have here is a pretty rough estimate of current dollar amount. So to lease a portable is about $21,300 a year. If you multiply that by 4 portables, you can see the cost. A 3-year lease actually gives us a bit of a discount. It would cost about $187,000, and then there are additional one-time costs. There's delivery charges, there's return charges, and then there's all the connectivity charges. So the cost of for portables for 3 years could be in excess of $591,000. Now, if you're talking about building a portable school, you're looking at 16 to 18 portables, and you can do the math. Okay. This does not include the cost to prepare the land. I cannot take portables and just drop it onto Ocean View Park. You have to be able to lay the asphalt, prepare it, and then when you return the portables, we would have to return the park to its condition.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I was just reading this myself, and can you please describe what you mean by Ocean View Park?
Yes, thank you.
I spoke to another board member and got cleared up, but I wasn't clear about it.
Thank you. That's a very good question. If you look at the property line for Albany Unified, it includes a portion of Ocean View Park. Currently, that park is used by Little League, it's used by soccer. That is correct. So, and I really want the community to understand, I am not throwing this idea out in any kind of cavalier way. This is going to impact, if this happens, this impacts sports in Albany because there's just not that much space available, okay? So it doesn't include the cost to plan, construct a foundation, or to return the park back to its park state. And costs are paid out of school bonds, and it will impact the remaining school construction projects. Now, the cost to purchase portables, and this was this conversation that I had, would it be cheaper to just purchase the portables? A portable costs approximately $150,000. So you times that by 4 portables is $600,000. The one-time costs are delivery and all the connectivity. You would not have the cost of removal because we would have purchased the portables. Costs, again, are paid out of school bonds. If you purchase the portables, we then have to do something with those portables once our 2 new schools are built. We could sell them. We could, I'm not sure if we can lease them. That I don't know. Or we could move them elsewhere. So option 3, building a portable school. The biggest advantage to building a portable school is all of our Ocean View, and eventually when we build Marin, the students and staff will be at one site during construction. And there's no impact to the other AUSD schools. It keeps the school community together, and it keeps school community events at one campus. The challenges are the cost of portables, for about 18 portables. And I said 18 portables because when you build a portable school, it's not just classrooms. You're building office space, you're building support space. The other challenge is the placement of the school in Albany. We would have to be able to fit 18 portables on the space at Ocean View Park. I am not 100% sure we could do that. I don't know if we can do 2-story portables to help create a portable school. Play space is going to be an issue because when you put a whole school there, you have to have the kindergarten play area as well as play area for the upper grades. And the students, again, for the entire school. And I really should add students and staff. This is not just about the students. The staff is also going to be impacted, that they will be adjacent to a construction site. Option 4, leasing a school. Again, the advantages are Ocean View and Marin students and staff will be at one site. Another really good advantage is that we could utilize the existing school site because the school will have, hopefully, a play area. They'll have lunch, PE, library, offices, some of the things that it would minimize the challenges that we have now in terms of finding every available space. And again, your school community events are all at one campus. Some of the challenges, again, are the cost to lease a school. This would depend on the leasing entity and, of course, when we would lease it. We would need to find a school that would hold approximately 540 students. And we would have to enter into a lease. And once we entered into it, it would probably be a multiple-year lease. Transportation, if there's busing, there's a transportation cost, or parents would drive their students to and from school. Before and after care is also a challenge because you would have before and after care at the schools that are in Albany. You would also have before and after care staff at this other school site. And again, it depends on where the school is. Our students would not be in Albany. and our support staff would have to travel between sites, or we would have to hire more staff. So in looking at all of these options, and going back to our original criteria, my recommendation is that we examine option 1. Keeps Albany kids in Albany schools. It maximizes our bond dollars. I do know that the AM/PM schedule is not the best. It is not the most feasible program to have. I know we have in the past had AM/PM kindergarten. There was a question that came up for students who were in our free and reduced lunch program. Would there still be lunch offered? And I talked to our Clell Hoffman, who is our executive chef for our food nutrition program, and he said, yes, we would make sure that students under our free and reduced lunch program would be provided lunch. So those are the options that I've given you. I know you've received a lot of emails. I did provide you with one. Parent asked, could not be here tonight, and asked that I make sure that I provide that to you. So that is my report.
Okay. Questions or discussion? Charlie?
So thank you very much for the report. I think that was a great package of information and very digestible. I appreciate that. I actually find myself more inclined toward options 1A and 3 than I expected I would be. I've been trying to think about this in terms of what is it that's really best for students. And I hope we'll have that discussion. And not to put you on the spot, Jacob, but I really want to ask you that question at some point, too. I think what I wanted to comment on right now is just related only to some of the cost considerations for portables. Because I think I see more possibility there than I did before. I think it would be interesting to look at whether we could fold our use of portables into our long-term plan. After all, the concept for rebuilding Ocean View is that we put 4 portables on the north part of the school site where the playground now is, and that will become the before school, after school program eventually. So when I think about it that way, it means we are already committing to spending money for infrastructure to support portables in that location. When I looked at the cost breakdown for the portables, over half of the cost breakdown for the leased portables is for putting in the infrastructure, for putting in the plumbing and electricity and so forth. Now, if we're really moving forward with that plan, that is, that plan that would put portables on what's now the playground for eventual use by before school and after school programs, then that's a cost that we're already incurring. So I wanted to think about it that way a little bit, that there is this possibility that this could be phased in a way that would allow us to deploy portables as we are already planning to do eventually. In terms of the number of locations, I know that, like, I don't know that this is where we'll wind up, option 3, but it may not be as daunting as it seems. There was a time when there were 4 portables that were placed on the parking lot at what's now Ocean View. There's certainly room on the asphalt, which is now the playground, for it must be room for at least 6 portables there. We already have 4 on the asphalt in the back for the after-school preschool program. That could hold 2 more. So I don't think it's necessary to actually put portables on the green. I think there's enough asphalt there to accommodate portables if that's a direction that we want to go. And I think that would be a far more cost-effective thing to do, that is, use the asphalt you already have and use the green for recess and PE. So I just wanted us to make sure we do examine all those possibilities and we think through the long-term plan. And you know, the temporary housing might actually dovetail with some of the eventual permanent plan. I think I am concerned, the more I thought about the number of different schools that kids have to be in. I don't know any way around this. I can't see it myself, but I'd like us to talk about it a little bit more. So we've got 2 grade levels at Ocean View that are going to be in 3 different locations in 3 years.
Explain that, Charlie.
So if kindergarten starts at Cornell and Marin, and then they move in the next year to the middle school, the year after that they move back to Ocean View, assuming we're done with construction. So that kindergarten cohort will be in 3 different locations in 3 years. I think the same thing is true for 3rd grade. 3rd grade starts at the middle school, moves the next year to the high school, and when construction is done, it moves back to Ocean View. Again, I don't know that we can avoid that, but I hope we'll think about it and talk about it a little bit. And then, I'm thinking about this also in terms of what is it that we can do to keep the Ocean View school community together. So I hope we'll talk about that as well. And then this is where I particularly want Jacob's input, just in terms of thinking about what is it that's best for students in terms of the teaching day. I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah, so I looked at all the proposals too, and thank you for getting them to us, Val, and I'm glad to see so many people here to give their input as well. I've mentioned this a few times before, but I'm sure a lot of people don't know. I'm a kindergarten teacher in San Leandro, and option 1 with the AM/PM schedule is just not ideal. I know that we have limited options, but I couldn't imagine half of my kids just showing up at 11:50 or 12 and that's starting the day. It just seems very detrimental to their learning. That's why we have 4 options here, and I'm glad that we're talking about it, but it also becomes an issue where are we going to look at families on a case-by-case basis and decide who gets the early schedule and the late schedule to try to accommodate people, or are we just going to randomly pick? I mean, it's a lot of issues that can come up. So if that is the option that the community and the board, when we finally do make a decision, has to go that route, I just wanted to kind of state that I'm trying my best as an individual board member to not have an AM/PM schedule.
Thanks. I'm going to add here that the board has gotten quite a few emails, communications from parents, and almost all of them, maybe all of them, have been addressing that issue, that they're concerned about the AM/PM schedule. And somehow they were given the impression, I don't know by whom, that this was a decision that had already been made. Just so you know, this is not a decision that has already been made. And if you're here specifically to tell us you don't like it, that's fine, but we know you don't like it. And I'm getting the feeling that, probably the board is not going to want to go that way. I have a question for Charlie. I'm trying to visualize your portable Ocean View on the blacktop. While Ocean View is being built, this would be in a construction zone. And when Ocean View is finished and Marin is being built, there'd be 2 schools at Ocean View. So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think I'm thinking that might be an asset for when Marin is built. If we have extra capacity at Ocean View to help absorb more students from Marin, that the presence of portables there could be an asset. I'd just like to see us do that analysis and think about it. We actually have, we have, in terms of the current construction plans, the intention of keeping the current 5th grade wing. So there's 1 grade level capacity at Ocean View remaining. I don't know if the construction can be done in a way that we're satisfied with. I mean, I can picture a situation in which we had portables in the front where the parking lot is. We're using the 5th grade wing. We're using the multi-purpose room. We're using the back courts where the after-school program is, and it's fenced off from the construction zone. I think that's conceivable, but I think we need to talk about it a little more. We do have construction going on at the middle school site. It's across the street from the middle school itself. It's been relatively minimal in terms of the invasiveness of the construction. We have construction going on, or will be going on, at the high school while school is in session. So these construction crews do know how to work at a school site when there's school in session. Whether they could actually find a staging area that they could use if we were using both the kind of south part of the site, where the multi-purpose room, the 5th grade wing is, and the north part of the site where the playground is, if we were to have those fenced off as portable zones or school zones, could they still do construction on the main building? I'd like to hear more about that.
Juan, do you want to weigh in on this? Do you have any opinions?
No, Juan.
Juan.
Juan, do you know if we could put is there enough space to?
So for those who don't know, Juan is our construction manager.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm following along, Board Member Blanchard, as you're talking, and I'm picturing what you're describing, and I think it's worth looking at. I think it is going to be extremely tight. And so I think what's going to be important is to look at that as early as we can and get an assessment from the teams that could be taking on that work. Mm-hmm. As you were talking, I was thinking that there's a small empty piece of land on the corner down the street that just got vacated that might be available for lease.
That's because we were kicked out.
But for construction projects,
a great situation.
It would be, I mean, you see that everywhere in the Bay Area where there's a construction project in a very tight, either urban zone, downtown zone, that there's places to lay down, there's places to stage. It doesn't have to be on the site itself. So I think there are options to look at. Some construction folks might be cringing as you're talking because you're setting up something pretty challenging, but it's the nature of that site.
Thanks. Kim?
Several things. So construction of the high school addition has been delayed with at least 3 months at this point. And so when you look at next fall, we need a place to keep the 4th and the 5th graders, and we thought about keeping the 5th grade wing at Ocean View, maybe keeping the 5th graders in the 5th grade wing, how about that? And using other associated classrooms near the multipurpose room for the 4th graders. And now we're talking about putting the portables that we intend to have on the north edge next to Buchanan, which would have been the after and before care, and having that be the kindergartens. And so we have 3 grades just snuggled up right next to a construction zone. And there's going to be noise and there's going to be dust. And I'm not sure how. I hope there's some representatives of our Ocean View community who can talk about how they would feel about that. I wanted to mention also that these options have been discussed by the facilities task force and the district leadership team for quite some time, but they haven't been discussed really here in open session. So it's a good thing that we've finally gotten to this stage. And One thing that has come up again and again has been the portable school and the lease of a school site. This wonderful school that's really close to Albany, and it's built for elementary school kids, and it has the right size, toilets for kindergartners. We haven't found it. And there has been an effort by staff to look to see if anything was available locally. I think they've looked as far south as Emeryville and as far north as El Cerrito.
We actually looked in Richmond as well.
And looked in Richmond as well. And so I think option 4 is just simply not available to us. When we're talking about building a portable school, and the sort of multiplying by 4 the different costs that you see on the cost of leased portable slide, and it would be more than 4 because you can't just cover the grades, as Superintendent Williams mentioned. You have to also cover the administrative wing, and you have to all of the specialty classrooms that are needed for English language learning, for OT, there's a host of those as well. So it would be more than 4 times that. Because I'm been involved in some of these subcommittees about the construction, I have to put a word of warning out in the room. We are very, very tight on the bond money. We're constantly talking about cutting and paring back and how we can deal with the rising cost in constructions so that we can build a new Marin Elementary. And, Marin is last in the queue, but as this money, starts going out the door, we start writing these checks, what that does is that it means that we're having to, if some of these options will end up reducing scope at Marin, and we want to build a good school for Ocean View and a good school for Marin. So it's our responsibility to keep that in mind as we make these decisions. Lastly, I have two short things to add. My kids are now in 12th grade and in 8th grade. And my 12th grader was in the AM/PM kindergarten that the district used to have. That was the norm. And he's fine. And my 8th grader went through the longer day, and he's fine. And so I just want to put out there that it hasn't been that long since this was the norm for our district. And to add on to that, and this is a counter to a kindergarten teacher, but it's another teacher. So when we were at the AMS addition with some Ocean View teachers on Friday, looking over those classrooms there, this issue came up about the temporary housing. And one of the Ocean View teachers was strongly against the idea of increasing kindergarten class size in order to accommodate a full-day kindergarten. I wish she could be here tonight, but she can't. We asked her, but she has her own kids at home. And she was talking about how rich the learning environment was in the AM/PM kindergarten because there were 2 teachers. Almost always there were 2 certificated teachers in the room for those kids at all time. So the teacher who was in charge for the PM program, was also helping out at the AM program. And I just want to put that out there, that it's not just a cut and dried what the best academic situation is for kindergartners. I think we have teachers here in the district who would have opinions on both sides of that. And maybe some of them are here. I don't know. I do see that some of our elementary principals are here and might be able to speak to that as well.
Thanks. Jacob?
Yeah, I received an email last week from a parent, and it sounds like she has a possible solution, not for the all the grade levels, but for kindergarten, and I'd just like to
Good.
briefly read part of it.
Sure.
The original part talks about how it would be a hardship on certain parents and, getting the kids to school and kids missing lunch and all this stuff. But as far as solutions, she said, I would like for the Albany Unified School District to seriously consider the following. Number one, identify 2 to 3 classrooms on existing school sites where kindergarten classrooms can be housed. 2, increase class sizes of kindergartners. If you can find just 2 classrooms, just 2, you could keep class sizes under 28 students. And then she says 3 possible classrooms that come to mind immediately are, and that's why I'm sharing this. So she says 1, the Albany Children's Center, which housed kindergarten classrooms several years ago. 2, the YMCA classroom that is adjacent to Cornell and is currently used for after-school care. And 3, room 25 at Marin Elementary that is currently used for after-school enrichment, not Tupelo. So I understand a lot of people are really involved in this discussion, and I know all the board members up here wanted to do what's best for all the kids. So I thought that was a possible solution. A lot of times people get upset, but they don't offer solutions. And I would like staff to maybe, I don't know if other people received it. I know we've all got a lot of emails.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Just as a aside, I appreciate that and appreciate the suggested solutions. I believe that the YMCA classroom does not meet state standards for a school. It's okay for a YMCA and for an after-school program, but I don't think we could legally use it for a classroom. But other than that, that's good thinking and good suggestions, and I appreciate that.
And I'd like to just throw one more out there. I'm sure a lot of these solutions aren't going to be popular with a lot of people, but I was thinking about it myself. I hate to kind of go one grade against another, but TK is fairly new, and there's only students who fall in that 3-month window who actually are available or allowed to go to TK. So as bad as that may be for those set of kids, maybe we were to not do TK for a couple years, so we don't have to,
I think the state mandates it.
the kindergarten's not required for parents to send the kids.
No,
I
but
don't
it's
know.
required that we offer it.
It's law that is.
Yeah, I think, and I will double check, but I think we have to offer TK by law.
Okay.
Right, but yeah, it could be combined with a kindergarten classroom. We have done that.
Well, yeah, not too long ago, there was no TK, and those kids were in a kindergarten class.
Okay, so at this point, I'd like to take comments from the audience.
I'd actually like to say something.
Okay, go ahead.
So like Kim, both of our daughters actually were in AM kindergarten at Marin. So we're used to the short day, though I don't know what I would say if someone had told me I'd have to give them afternoon kindergarten. We didn't have that problem, and had one parent home, so we may have been more a special case. Second, the Ocean View Park is a city park, right? I mean, if we were to use Ocean View Park, it would be with the consent of the city.
Part of it is school property and part of it is, but we have agreements with the various clubs and people who are playing ball on it.
Yeah.
It would be abrogated if we used it for a school.
Right, so we in the interest of that being an option, we should maintain good relations, in fact, build better relations with the city, I would guess. I would also recommend if folks aren't talking to them, to talk to the USDA facility there adjacent to Ocean View Park, and just on the off chance that something strange is happening. If they say, well, yeah, we're actually tearing down a bunch of greenhouses and didn't know what we'd do with the space, they have parking for a lot of folks. It could very well be that the USDA facility is quite happy remaining like that, but it is a very large structure in the vicinity, and we should at least find out, or at least tell them we may be doing construction next to them. I would caution that there is no Ocean View design approval yet. And after that, there will need to be an Ocean View submission to the Division of State Architect, and there will need to be that process, et cetera. We can plan to do things as of September, but it may be that there's no school to build as of next September because of this whole series of things that have to happen, right? I mean, we haven't got a broken ground on AHS other than to scrape the courtyard because we haven't yet got a approved plan to build there. So let's not, leap to do things where that is absolutely a risky gating factor. And then lastly, I remember before Alan Gard left, he was showing the sort of clawing some monies back, et cetera, to try to squeeze out of Marin. And we've seen increased expenses, and because of this delay, at least with AHS, some more potential risky losses of the funding. At some point, we will have to be weighing what's Plan B if we can't build 2 whole schools. And I applaud the group that has been working on, but we have not, as a board, been presented on the reduced or reusing portions of Ocean View. But we may have to go back and, as a full board, really revisit how are we going to get what we need out of this. We could end up with a school full of portables on the Marin site, because we could build that after the earthquake. We'll have to see where we end up, but I would caution that we should be iterating a little more regularly on what can we actually afford to build and what makes the most sense.
Thanks. Okay, back to public comment. Please try to keep, I'm assuming we'll have more than one person who wants to talk, so please try to keep your comments to 3 minutes. And if somebody else has said what you were going to say, just say, I agree with them. You don't have to repeat it. Go ahead.
Good evening, Board President, Vice President, trustees, student members, Superintendent. I'm trying something new. I just have 3 points. Neri Castillo McIntyre. I'm the father of India McIntyre, who is a first grader at Ocean View in the special education program. And I just have 3 points. One is to reiterate the ones that I made at the previous board meeting, add 2 more or elaborate on those 2. And the third one is to reinstate a request. The first one, I would like to ask that the students in the special education program at the elementary level be kept at Cornell. Those who are in Ocean View be moved to Cornell for the reasons that I stated before. Safety, and it would remain the least restrictive environment, which is not exactly, I am not entirely sure, I don't see evidence that that would be the case if they were placed at the middle school annex. They might be safe, but I don't know if that is the least restrictive environment for them. The second is the infrastructure. Cornell already has the infrastructure for the special education students to receive all the services that they already received: occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, adaptive PE, and so forth. And to the second point, to elaborate on that, on the infrastructure, I don't know, and I don't believe that you would have a motor room in the annex at the middle school. And that is not simply a room with 4 walls, a ceiling, and a door. It's a room that requires a special equipment, especially suspended equipment. And that's already available at Cornell Elementary. So that's one good reason to keep the students there. Safety, you mentioned traffic somewhere in the report. In informal conversations with the drivers who take special education students to their schools, they have voiced concerns about pickups and drop-offs at the elementary school site. On the other hand, they would very much prefer to drive their students to and from Cornell Elementary, where they already have the experience doing so, and the traffic wouldn't be as great as it would be at the middle school. And finally, with the 30 seconds, at the previous board meeting, I asked that the board consider placing the special education students at Cornell University. I write to reinstate it and ask formally that the special education students be placed at Cornell Elementary School during this entire process. And it would give greater stability. 9 seconds to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, board, community members. I just had, I think, 3 questions as well. I'll try to blow through them quick. So one, I think, was clarification, maybe more to you, Val. I'm just curious, I think, as far as like the committee that is determining these options or helping develop these options and then further reviewing them. I thought I heard 1 parent. Is that true that you spoke with?
I actually sat down and met with one parent who sat with me about 45 minutes to an hour that in terms of some of the challenges and advantages for some of these options, I actually got from that parent. I have received several emails as well.
Okay. So there's no actual committee discussing these options. This is the meeting where we're discussing these options.
And how many staff are involved in developing options? Because I feel like
I worked with all of the site administrators and principals as well as my executive cabinet.
no teachers.
I do know that more so than the other sites, Ocean View principal has discussed with teachers. I think this other lesser degrees are Marin and Cornell principal.
One, and I don't need an answer right now, for the high school project that's delayed, any reason why it can't be expedited? What kind of options are looked at there? Three, I'll
okay.
just get it out there. Maybe not so much a question, but a recommendation that either you personally try to go do your work near a construction site, or maybe even have a special meeting near a construction site, and you tell me how disruptive or non-disruptive that is. Thanks.
Thanks. In terms of expediting the work at the high school, we're being held up by the state. It's not the actual construction that's slow. And in terms of work near a construction site, yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's certainly a concern. Terry, did you want to comment for us on how you've consulted with teachers?
Good evening. My name is Terry Georgeson. I'm principal at Ocean View School. As far as the timeline of sharing these various options or thought processes with my staff, once we kind of developed some ideas and thoughts to what we could do, I have talked with my staff probably a half a dozen times, sharing various options. One was the Ocean View Park itself that we looked at. The other was looking for another site that we all wish existed. I worked for a short time in Piedmont when we, while I was there, were in the process there with some of the elementary schools, and there were a couple schools in Emeryville that we had used. So when we first started this discussion after we got our bond, that was one of the thoughts that I had, was maybe those schools were still available. Didn't take long for us to figure out that Emeryville wasn't available. There were a couple staff members that were aware of a couple schools in Richmond, but I know through the research that Alan did with us, Richmond was really holding on to their sites because they're doing a lot of the same work themselves. So my staff looked and talked and asked about some of those availabilities, because that would have been their first option. Given what's up here and the discussions that I've had with my staff, option 1 and 1A are the two that they lean to, even though they know it's an incredibly complex and compact plan. They are really adamant, and I think you would hear from them very quickly if you wanted to put portables in the middle of a construction zone, particularly when we're talking about perhaps putting kindergartners there in the hopes of preserving our AM, PM, or our early bird, late bird program. They're the ones who would be the most vulnerable to the noise and to the dust and to all of those things. So I have talked with them, and as far as when I talk with where the complexity of 1 and 1A are, they still seem to be supportive of it and wanting to continue this process. They have a lot of friends and colleagues at Marin, and they know the longer it takes for Ocean View, they also know the longer it would take for Marin. And to their credit, they see this as a collaborative process of both sites, both staff trying to get to a win-win as opposed to delaying and hoping we can at least get one school done. So I don't know if that helps.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. Kim?
Just another topic to add into the discussion here. If we did need to move to an AM/PM kindergarten, I think that every parent's concern is going to be, what am I going to do for childcare in the other half of the day? Has the district discussed any plans on what we could offer for before and after care to help our parents?
We are in ongoing discussions. I have met with the director of the YMCA, who is very interested in continuing ideas and collaboration. The 3 elementary principals and I have been talking, I would say, regularly about not just the 3 elementary principals, as well as Anna Mansker, who is our ACC director, on what we could offer in terms of before and after care. As I said, it's going to be very tight in terms of spacing and what we can offer. And it might mean that we will have to hire additional staff. I mean, I don't want us to think that we'll be able to move in this kind of a program and not have there be some expenses outside of, saving bond dollars. I've been in conversation with the city because I'm looking not just for our kindergartners, but our 4th and 5th graders who are going to the high school. Right now, there's a current play structure that is at Memorial Field. We've talked about being able to potentially drill a couple of holes. I know this sounds very simplistic, I apologize, but to put in a couple of tetherball poles to be able to paint some 4 squares so that there's play space. But in terms of the before and after school, that is an ongoing discussion. I don't think we have that completely solved. We would have to be very creative, working with the Y, working with ACC. And with ACC, it's not just who's providing the before and after care, but we also have to look in terms of the supervision as well.
Hi, I'm Rachel. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. I've already emailed you all and talked with Val about some of my concerns for the AM and PM kindergarten. And I wanted to check in on a few things. And one is we had kind of left the discussion of could the ACC site be used and do morning kindergarten on the regular schedule from like 8 until 12:30, so you maintain the 4.5-hour day, and then do TK exclusively in the afternoon from like 1 to 5:30 or something like that, which does, I know cause issues for the TK, but as we've talked about, that only affects 1/4 of families, and then they would benefit from a better kindergarten situation. And I know there were some concerns that the ACC space didn't meet the kindergarten requirements, and then I found out there actually was a kindergarten class at the ACC several years ago. So I'm also wondering if there's like just a little bit of leeway with some of the state regulations around space for a temporary situation. Like I know Marin School, our kindergarten classroom didn't have an attached bathroom. So if you can fudge a little square footage, or some of these things could just be addressed in the context of, okay, this is a temporary situation and we're building a better school. Where did you land on that?
So we do have the TK classrooms in those portables. What this does impact, though, is the preschool program.
How if the TK and the kindergarten share the same classroom?
So you're saying that we'd still have an AM/PM schedule,
but the kindergarten would be in the AM and it would be a longer schedule. So they'd be on a regular morning schedule from 8:30 or 8 in the morning until 12:30. So it would be the same length kindergarten day that they currently have. They could have a lunch and a recess in there. And then in the same classroom space, the TK would come in the afternoon. And what works about that plan is that TK kids still qualify for preschool. So if you connected with a few preschools and had them do a TK, go to preschool in the morning and then they could do free TK in the afternoon, you've met the requirement of offering a TK program and providing an option for those families by saying, okay, we know it's just the afternoon, but in the morning you could go to preschool. And then kindergartners get the benefit of having a longer day, of having the free time, no reduction in instructional time, and they're still on the morning schedule, which one of the concerns with afternoon kindergarten is, aside from the inconvenience of it, is the fact that it's just not a great time for kids to learn. I know my 4-year-old is often toast at 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and a lot of kids, are just not at their best. I get how this translates to an issue for the TK program, but again, there's more options for TK families.
And I think I would need to look at the fact that there's 4 kindergarten classrooms at Ocean View, and there's 2 TK classrooms at ACC.
There aren't 3? Weren't there 3 classes there?
2. One I believe now is being used as a special education room. I can check, but even if there were 3, we still have 4 kindergarten classrooms. We would end up having to put 4 kinder classrooms in terms of class size into 3, which would raise our...
Or maybe just find one other classroom, like room 25 at Marin, or like a single portable at Cornell, maybe? I don't know, just looking at options. Can I make one more quick comment? The other thing I just want to point out in terms of the proposed schedule for the older elementary school kids is the number of transitions a 3rd grader would go through. So if you're in 3rd grade when the construction starts, you're there for, you leave your old school, you go to the junior high school for 1 year, you go to the high school for 1 year, hypothetically you go back to your other school, and then you go to middle school. And so I just, that's a lot for an elementary school kid. And it's definitely a concern. So, thank you.
Thanks. It's actually something that, some kids do very well with transitions and it wouldn't be a problem, and for some kids it would be a major issue. And I think going into it, parents would have to know it was coming up, and they might want to make other arrangements or ask for a transfer to another school or something if this was going to be a huge problem for their kid. Just a thought. Kim?
I just want to give a little history. Several years ago, the district had a facilities task force, and that involved a couple of community members who were construction professionals, our previous chief business official who was running all these numbers and trying to work on how to allocate all of the bond funds. I think that our project manager, Juan Barrosa, was a part of that group, and several board members. And so we sketched out a lot of stuff in those meetings. And sorry if I'm not remembering the full group and everyone who was involved there. But then I know we came up with a sort of we sort of hatched a plan for relocation. And what I remember is when we, when that kind of was talked about, the principals of the elementary schools and the middle school and the high school said, whoa, you guys are not the educational professionals. You don't know what it means for a kid to be in a learning environment. We really need to own this. We need to be the ones that are talking about this. And so that's when this discussion transferred to the leadership team that Val's talking about. I think that the people who've been working on these plans, I mean, you see what we've got, and everybody up here has admitted that this is inconvenient and this is imperfect. But I do want to respect the hours of work and the numerous scenarios that our principals have put into thinking about what's the best possible solution that we can come to, given all of our restraints, because the restraints of space are extreme. We're a tight district anyway. We're an overcrowded district. That's why we're building new schools. And then to have to sort of double up and find a room during construction puts additional burdens on everyone. So we're tight on budget. There's some things that might work if we had deeper pockets, but we definitely don't. So, I'm glad that we're all in this room together, trying to see if we can get some ideas from you guys, that maybe haven't been thought of and maybe haven't been considered, so that we can make this, the best that we can. But I do feel that in the end, the next few years are going to be inconvenient for a lot of families.
Charlie?
So I have one question that just occurred to me, and that is, when we move grades 1 through 5 to the middle school and high school annexes or additions, where will the after-school programs for those grade levels be located? Would the intent be to move the kids back to Ocean View where the current portables are? And if that's not the plan, what are we doing with the portables, the 4 portables that are back there?
So one of the ideas we had is there are 2 larger rooms, I'll call them, at the middle school annex. One is the
Computer lab.
Thank you. I was going to say the library because I'm thinking the library would go there. The computer lab. The other one is the drama area that could be potentially used. It is not the most advantageous to use a classroom for an after-school space. One, because there is contract language that says that teachers need to have access to their classroom. At the high school, we would be looking at, again, the larger spaces, what would be the maker space. So that's why I said it's going to be tight. There will be a lot of shared space. We actually thought about, is there a possibility of having some of the Ocean View rooms be open and having the kids walk? And we really looked at the distance that the kids from the middle school and the high school new additions would have to walk back, or would there be some sort of a transportation? We did consider it. It was not the best. It was not the best situation.
So then I guess my follow-up is we have 4 portables sitting on a corner of the Ocean View site about as far away from the construction zone as it's going to get. Are they just going to sit there unused while we do construction, or can we use them?
It's a very good question, and I do not have an answer to that.
Charlie, aren't some of those going to be used for the 4th graders in the fall, given everything goes along with the
Well,
addition?
I think we need to talk about that too, but there is the possibility that for the 4th graders, they would continue to use the 2 4th grade classrooms that are attached to the multi-purpose room, plus rooms 40 and 41, which is a modular adjacent to the multi-purpose room. So there's 4 rooms available for 4th graders.
Aren't 40 and 41 part of the 4 portables that you're
No,
talking about? So
those are
there's 6?
there's 6 total. So there's on the back part to the west of the multi-purpose room, there's a row of 3, and then behind that row of 3, there's kind of a triple wide. It's an extra large size. So there's a total of 4.
But we also need some of those portables, again, remember, for support services. And so and I know Terry's still here. Thank you, Terry, for still being here. In terms of looking at what support services would we be able to use those rooms for?
Okay. We're running a little behind schedule now. If there's anyone else in the audience who wants to talk, why don't you come up now? And this is not an action item tonight, so we're not making any final decisions tonight, but we'll decide when we're going to talk about this again before we finish.
Hi, my name is Sarah Shawcross. I have a few questions. We're talking about the portables being on the field, and then we're talking about the 4th graders using the existing portables. Where is the construction actually going to happen? Because it sounds like you guys want to use like all of Ocean View space.
A lot to have.
Yeah, I mean, I could help with that actually, because Kim and I have been part of these committee meetings. I mean, at this point, iteration number 16 of the design plan, I'm not sure how many total iterations there will be, is to replace the main building. And it's essentially going to be a very similar kind of building, only 2 stories and just a little bit bigger.
Okay, so that's very close to the 5th grade, where the 5th graders are right now then, obviously.
It would be. I mean, it would be just to the north of where the 5th graders are now.
So I just want to remind, I mean, I know you guys know, but elementary schools are very busy places and construction sites are very busy places. And to combine the 2 just sounds, it concerns me. So.
You think we could teach the kids to operate backhoes?
Good evening. I just had a quick question. When you were looking at possible alternative elementary school sites, did you get as far south as the Santa Fe Elementary Building in Oakland?
I did not know that there was a Santa Fe option open. What we tried to do was to look at how close we could get to Albany in terms of busing. And when I had floated the idea of Emory, Emory was a little bit pushing it. We could look at Oakland. It's a bit of a commute, but we could look at that option.
So the Santa Fe Elementary School building is located at 55th and Adeline.
Okay.
So it's relatively far north in Oakland. It's currently housing, well, it was Santa Fe, obviously, but it's currently housing the Glenview Elementary, which is being housed there during the Glenview construction project in Oakland. But they are scheduled to wrap up at the end of this year. I know because they just moved from Oakland, and we were looking at that school. So unless they have delays, that building, which is a former elementary school, should be open at the start of the 2019 school year.
I'll check into that.
Worth checking out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm the parent of a first grader at Marin, and I have a almost 2-year-old who will be one of the kindergarten students impacted. I just wanted to echo what Rachel had said, and I emailed several of you as well. And I just really wanted to encourage you to try to find an option other than option one. It just seems like shortening the school day, not having as much recess and lunchtime, and having an AM/PM schedule, especially as a 2 working parent family who really would have no option other than have our child in after care or before care for the remainder of that day, and not in the kindergarten, the longer kindergarten day. It just feels like it would be a really, not just inconvenient, but really a hardship for 4 years' worth of kindergartners in this community. So I would just ask that.
Thanks. Okay. We're going to take one more and then.
Well, I'll be quick.
That's
Good
okay.
evening. I just wanted to echo what Sarah and Rachel said, and I would urge you to also consider option 1A as opposed to option 1. Currently, the kindergarten classes are already an hour, if not more, shorter than the Contra Costa, Piedmont, and Oakland school districts. To further truncate it by an extra hour to the detriment of our children learning, and to cut out some of the more important programs, and to require half of the kids to start at 12 or 12:30. It just seems like a more invasive, disruptive option, and just to consider all the working parents who are sending their kids to Albany schools. If we can find something that's less disruptive, that would be very helpful.
Thank you. Okay, so Jacob?
Yeah, just real quickly, I know we're behind, sorry. I just wanted to thank everybody for coming tonight and having a conversation where it looks like we're all trying to come together and do something for the better of all of our students and the community. Unfortunately, during the last couple years, the meetings don't go like this. And people are hoping in the future that whatever the topic may be, this is kind of what I envisioned when I ran for the school board, for us to all work together. And I'm very hopeful that this type of collaboration and communication continues, because it hasn't been happening, and I want to thank all of you.
Thanks, Jacob. So the superintendent made a plaintive plea. She said, can we eliminate any of the options? My initial impression is no, because we just had a suggestion for a possible school to look into. Charlie had ideas about a portable school. 1A and 1B are still kind of out there. So I'm not sure we can, but Charlie?
I haven't heard much enthusiasm for delaying. That's option
Right,
2.
okay, we can eliminate the delay. All right, good. Any other thought? My other thought is, of course, budget is a major issue. So my personal preference would be for an option that maximizes the money that's available for the construction, because we really don't want to shortchange the schools, because this will be something the kids will be using for the next 20 to 40 years. And if we build inadequate schools, it's going to hurt the educational program for a long time to come. Sorry?
Yeah, I apologize, but I just wanted to, before you wrap this up, I just wanted to ask you to, as you are thoughtful in recognizing that these are schools for the next 40 or 50 years, but also recognize that the clock is ticking if I'm going to do anything around planning for a move. So if we are seriously considering using the annex at all, then I have to prepare a school to pack up and to move and to consider all of the questions that have been brought up. I'm in the middle of considering that move already because that's been the direction I've been given. And in order to be well prepared for it, I need to give my staff the time they need to do all of the things it takes if you've moved your own home to do that. So it would be nice to have an idea of what kind of timeline we're talking about around considering options and looking for various sites in Oakland, and are we going to consider the park because then that considers the city. All of these are really complex options that one more board meeting isn't going to give you an answer. So is that 2 or 3 more board meetings? Does that take us into March or April? Which means then I don't have time to pack up a school. So if we're going that far ahead, then we need to be bold sooner than later and make a decision that would allow me to be able to use my time and my staff's time to determine what we're going to do. So if you could consider that as you're trying to be thoughtful in the process.
Thank you. I agree, and I think we should bring this back to the board for a decision, knowing that we do policy. Policy is always done without complete knowledge and all the answers. We're just going to have to do the best we can. So when can we bring it back?
Can I make a comment before I answer your question? If I'm going to explore the possibility of finding an alternative school site outside of Albany to lease, I am going to need to jump on that pretty quickly. So for example, if I look at the Santa Fe Elementary School and they say, yes, it's open, then that means I'm going to have to enter into negotiations with them pretty quickly. I don't know what the charter school movement is in terms of who's looking for school sites. Okay, I heard about a school in West Contra that I thought was a viable site, and then we found out, nope, a charter school wants it. So I'm going to need to move on that pretty quickly in terms of not saying making decisions, because I do need to bring all that to the board too, is if I could have a bit of a timeline that says, okay, Val, if you're going to look at schools outside of Albany, it's a 2-week window or it's a 3-week window, because a school could come up in March and we will have had to have made a decision.
My guess is that any school we found would be cost prohibitive. It's just not cheap to lease a school. When we looked at it before and did talk about prices, it was going to cost a lot of money.
So then my question is, do we eliminate option 4 as a possibility?
I'd say you should look into this one school you have a lead on. And if it, in fact, is available and will be available, try to get an idea of what it'll cost, and we can consider that. But I wouldn't spend a lot of time. This is my personal opinion, and the board can weigh in on this. Looking for every possible option in the Bay Area. I just don't think it's going to happen. Jacob?
Yeah, I understand the urgency as far as stepping up and making a decision, and I thank you for bringing that up, Ms. Georgeson. Only thing I have concern about that is as long as we're having the high school addition be part of that, and we don't know when it's going to be finished, it makes it hard for us to. Let's say we take this option. It shows the 4th and 5th graders going to the high school addition, and we don't know if we're going to be just delayed 3 months or if it's going to be more.
And actually, it is something that I've been concerned about. We can hope that there are no more delays and that we do open. There's sort of a point of no return. Moving a school at winter break. Even moving a school at midwinter break becomes more problematic. But by the time you get to spring break, I'm going to recommend that to this board that we not move a school at spring break. We're going to be right in the middle of testing. So, and I did make the impassioned plea, if we can eliminate one or two options. I mean, and I'm hearing that option 1A seems more palatable than option 1. I will definitely look at option 4 in the terms of Santa Fe Elementary School. If that doesn't work out, then we can eliminate option 4. But that leaves option 3. I don't know about option 2. Do we want to push more for option 1A rather than option 1?
Kim?
I just want to comment that these folks are here tonight because they heard that we were considering changing back to an AM/PM kindergarten program. I wonder how full the room would be if we were going to send our kids to 55th and Adeline. The option of having a school that's built that has elementary classrooms and the right facilities is very appealing, but I think that people in our community would have concern about that neighborhood. I drive through there quite a bit, and
Yeah, we heard concern about that
Yeah.
when we were considering a school in Emeryville. So but I think we need to do our due diligence and just find out what it is.
I think we should do a due diligence and find out if it's available and what the price is like. I think part of that due diligence is also going to be to get a police report about crime in the area.
Jacob, want to?
Yeah, just real quick, I am really realizing that this needs to be decided on, not tonight, but construction costs go up and all that, and thank you again, Terry, for bringing it up. Does the board have an idea on a goal on when we would like to make a decision?
I was
I think
thinking
that will make us.
Yeah. I was thinking the
have to make a
second meeting
decision.
in November. I'm thinking.
How does everybody, because
what
I
do
would
people
like to
think
make
about
a
that?
decision sooner than.
I won't be able to have enough information for the first meeting in November, but the second one.
The second meeting in November.
Second meeting in November, I can
Try
bring
to
it
bring
back.
it back then for a decision.
I then also would really like to see some timelining on Ocean View construction that recognizes that things like DSA are potentially variable. You know, we can say we expect to do it in 2 years, but if we don't break ground on it until December of next year, say, that could really put a stick in the spoke of a lot of other plans. So let's at least get some tentative construction timelines too for anything at Ocean View.
Is that possible? About the second meeting? I'm not trying to put extra work on the staff.
Well, we can flesh out the sort of known past practices. It's taken X amount of time for this to happen. If we're going to actually have approval to break ground, it's no less than 12 months, no more than 15, say.
I think I can work with Juan on that too, to get as close as possible an estimate for the board.
Good. Okay.
Melissa has it.
All right, you get the last word.
Sorry, but I just want to jump in with one quick thing. There's so many thoughtful things to consider. I don't envy you in this decision. Construction is never easy. It seems to always be delayed, and it seems to always cost more. And I feel like there's a lot that I'd want to echo tonight, but I guess that in the additional point that I would like to consider, because you don't have enough to consider, but another piece of it in exploring these other options and looking at portables, I think it is important to back up, just as you did earlier, Board Member Trutain, and I appreciate that, backing us up to some history and remembering that these are Albany community bond dollars that our community has supported, and we appreciate that, and we want to maintain trust with our community and get this project done, absolutely. And so I think, and I understand that there's going to be a lot of flexibility needed in deciding how to move forward, because it's not going to be perfect. That's amply clear. So I think in moving forward and considering other options, it would be important to me, and I would think important to the community as well, to know how these additional costs are clearly going to impact the current projects, the future projects, and I say that knowing that my school is going last, for sure, but also understanding that it's not just my school that could be impacted by extra costs, and want to consider the whole piece. So that's just one more thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to bring this back, the second meeting in November, and
For discussion or?
For decision.
For a decision.
We're going to try to make a decision.
Okay.
And we now have 5 minutes to do all the review and action, so I'm going to ask if we can extend the meeting until 10 o'clock.
I second that.
Okay.
First it.
So this brings us to business services, independent contractor agreement, removal and replacement of concrete.
Thank you. I'm going to turn this over to our chief business official, Jackie Kim. Ms. Kim.
Minor things.
Can you?
While we're doing that, I really want to thank Simone, who is subbing tonight for Julie. This is her first time being our secretary here. So thank you, Simone. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
It's good training.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think we got it now. Okay, so this item is to review and approve the independent contractor agreement with Mercosa for removal and replacement of concrete area at the entrance to Cornell Elementary School. And the expected time frame is November 19th to 23rd, and it's going to be $16,992 in general fund under the maintenance account.
Okay, do we have any comments or questions on this contract? My understanding is that it sounds like a lot of money, but compared to a lawsuit if somebody tripped and injured themselves, this is cheap. Is that?
That is correct. And I actually walked on that area in, if you can imagine, Val in high-heeled shoes. I actually walked it, and there are pits in that sidewalk that are pretty deep. And so it does need to be repaired.
So it's $32 a square foot.
Sidewalk tax.
Okay, so do we have a, there's no more discussion, do we have a motion? Do we have a motion to approve the independent contractor agreement with Mercosa?
I move we approve this contract.
And second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Well, you know, we might get through all this in 5 minutes anyway. Okay, amendment for design-build services with Alton Construction.
And I'm going to turn, then we're just going to keep going here with Chief Business Official, Jackie Kim.
A little further down,
A couple more pages.
It's page 94.
It's 94.
There it is.
So this item is to review and approve the amendment for design build services with Alton Constructions for Albany High School addition project to include relocation of existing electrical utilities and redesign required by the revised California Geological Survey criteria. And this, so then this will bring us to have the recommended guaranteed maximum price of $7,540,088, and this is going to be increase of $150,195 in Measure B bond fund.
Okay, so as far as the existing electrical utilities go, has this already been done, or?
So the first one, so there are two bullets right there in the background. The first one was done already, only because when the work was happening, they discovered, right, when they dig into the land, and they now have to do the work right then. So the work has been done.
Okay, so the main part of this is for the redesign required by the CGS criteria, and this is just for the design, not for the actual extra work that will be required by the redesign. Is that right?
Yes,
Correct.
only for the reason, yes.
Okay. Any questions, comments on this? Okay. We have a motion.
So I move that we increase the guaranteed maximum price by $150,195.
I second.
All in favor of amending the design build services with Alden Construction to increase the price? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Good. Now we have an independent contractor agreement with ProCare Therapy Incorporated.
I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Nierheim, who's our Director of Student Services.
Good evening, President Black, our Board of Trustees, and Superintendent Williams. I'm just bringing to you a contract for a licensed vocational nurse who's providing medical support to a student.
Okay. Do we have questions on this? All right. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the independent contract agreement with ProCare Therapy, Inc.
Good. Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
in favor, say aye.
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 That was premature. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have a resolution through, in opposition to Proposition 5, property tax transfers. Kim, I think you brought this to our attention.
Yes, and actually, Kim, if I'd like to defer to you if you would like to introduce this item.
Sure, let me get to it 1 second.
Page 106.
Yes, so Proposition 5 is on our November ballot, and the background information provided in the agenda has information from California School Board Association and also has Legislative Analyst Office data. What the proposition would do would be to change the ability for a senior or a disabled person to move once and take their property tax evaluation with them to their new home. So that was put into Prop 13 as a part to help the senior citizens and the disabled when they're trying to downsize to a smaller home so that they don't get hit by a new property tax bill that's extremely high and makes that move be not feasible for them. What Prop 5 is it greatly expands that to the point where somebody could move any number of times and into any part of the state and keep their own property tax. And this would pull a lot of money away from our schools. So property tax is all funneled through Sacramento, but it does come back to the schools, and decreasing the amount available will further hurt education in our state. I appreciate the cause of trying to help seniors, and I think that there are many modifications of Prop 13 that I would definitely agree with, but I think Proposition 5 is poorly written and will hurt education. So this is not the right move going forward, in my opinion, or in CSBA's opinion, and I thought the board might agree with us also.
Charlie.
So I'm happy to support this resolution. It seems quite clear to me that Proposition 5 simply piles one inequity on top of another one. So I'm happy to support it.
Thanks. Jacob.
Yeah, when I first saw this, sometimes I'm skeptical about certain things, but the more I did kind of research about it, I think the way it is right now is fair, that they can move one time and not have their taxes go through the roof to be able to do it in a limited amount of times. I don't agree with it. You know, I love people of a certain age, trying to say it nicely. At first, I thought I might be against this, but the more I read it and saw how much money it could take from the schools, I backed this resolution.
Good. Okay, I agree with the resolution. I like it. I have one modification, possible modification, and this is a technicality, and I've known about this for a long time and kind of let it pass, but the signature line says clerk of the Board of Trustees, and a clerk is a position that exists for boards that are not under city charters. This board does not have a clerk. So it should be signed probably by, and the clerk would not be the secretary of the board, it would not be the superintendent. The clerk would be what we have as a vice president. But the clerk has signature powers that our vice president doesn't have. So this probably needs to be signed by me.
Go for
So
it.
I should probably say president rather than clerk. Other than that, I'm happy to vote for this. So with that one change, do we have a motion?
I would like to move that we accept Resolution 2018-19-07.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. That is the business for the evening. Now we have agenda items, matters introduced by the board.
Thank you. We have 4. We're going to bring back elementary temp housing on the second November board meeting, governance handbook back in review and action on the first November board meeting, board bylaw 9320, November 9 board meeting, review and action, and board self-evaluation. I have the first board meeting, but is that a review and discussion or a review and action?
It's an action item.
So those 3 are review and action.
Jacob.
Yeah, earlier on during the board report time, it maybe wasn't the right time, but I really do want to have the board discuss as soon as possible if we can have a survey about the later start time. Because I don't want another year to go by without us. Who knows what the vote is going to be, but we need to vote on it so we can, if it passes, we can implement it next year.
I'm sorry, I had a question just on one. The board at the last board meeting had to do with the district goals, and each board member had taken a different piece of that. When would the board like that to come back?
Ooh, when will everybody be done?
So we now have a first November board meeting that is at about 180 minutes.
Maybe the second board meeting in November?
The second
maybe
November
the
board
first
meeting?
One in December. When are we? No, we need to do it a little sooner than December. Can we do it in the second?
Second meeting of November?
We do have time in the second November meeting.
We have, Jacob and I have a piece that isn't done, but we'll be done by then.
Yeah, I haven't done my piece either, so yes. Audrey, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, Jacob, I wanted to say that we did a survey at the high school. I don't know if you have that information, but I sent it to Val, and I think she...
Is that for just students and teachers?
That was for students.
Okay, yeah, because I want to get one from the teachers and the community as a whole.
Okay.
If you guys want to work on it, it'd be
We
great.
can facilitate the one for the teachers.
I'm ready to move on it. And it came up a while back before you guys were on the board that I was very explicit about. I wanted a survey.
Okay.
Even in certain people, I thought maybe didn't want the survey because it might not have came back favorably to them. It didn't really matter the results of the survey. It mattered that we had one and everyone had a chance to weigh in. So I'm on the wellness. I mean, it should probably go through us, but I want to get it done, and I asked for it a while back and it didn't happen.
Okay. Can you give your survey to Val so that
I did.
Use it as a starting point?
Yeah.
She did.
Kim?
I, in my individual meeting with Val next week, one of the things that I wanted to talk about was a larger survey to the parent community that that would deal with a number of issues, maybe 4 different issues. So I I was just thinking about if we were going to go out to the parents and publicize the survey, that we needed to get as much mileage out of it as possible. So
It doesn't have to be its own separate survey. I mean, whatever. I just want to have something in front of me to say that we spoke to people, this is what they said, and then for us to make a decision.
So there's also, I've just been in conversation with Dax about, do we want to redo the Speak Up Technology survey? We just did one. I don't know if we need to do that again, but I think there's a couple points. One is whatever the questions we have for the start times. I know there was concern that was raised by a board member about the questions we had asked in a previous survey was not as specific. So, Kim, do you want to work with me on questions that we could do, and we'll take a look at the questions that Audrey sent me. It probably should be a very quick survey. I mean, a short survey if we can.
Questions?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's the idea of the short. I want to think about it some more. I mean, because I do think that there's also survey fatigue, and I think that there's a number of things that we need to ask the parent community about. You just referred to the calendar survey that was done that asked people if they were satisfied with the holidays, but didn't tell people that, one of the options was to have a full week off at Thanksgiving. I mean, everybody is going to be reasonably happy with the status quo, especially if an attractive alternative is not presented as an option. And so I'm concerned about several calendar issues. And all of these have, they relate to families, community, and student stress. So
we could take the calendar, what I think I hear you saying is school start time as well as another calendar survey. They kind of sort of go together.
Yeah, we can try to get it short, but I think that one reason that we had the room packed tonight with parents is because they were very I think that more families in Albany now are dual professional families. Two of the women who spoke live on my street, on my block. And I know that they're dual professional families. One of them said so at the mic. And I think that one of their concerns is perhaps not so much that, whether it went to AM or PM kindergarten, but the fact that they need to have childcare all day long. And we need to know what the Albany community wants the school system to provide, really before we even make our district goals. We need to be informed by the community what kind of schools we're trying to build here. And so I don't think that we're going to be able to get input from the community before we do our district goals that we just discussed. But I want to try to put something in place so that we have a real feedback loop that guides us in future years.
Kayla?
Yeah, I actually had been thinking about something really similar to what you had just mentioned when everybody was coming up here and talking about their opposition to the AM/PM schedule or whatnot, and they were, the community was giving all these suggestions as to what we should do with the temporary housing of Ocean View. And I was thinking about it, and there's all these opinions that the public has, but we heard a very small number of opinions of actually the population that these changes will affect. And so I was thinking that finding out what parents and teachers and students, what all of our priorities are in regards to the temporary housing of Ocean View, like would you rather have it be at this leasing this new school site that was just brought up, and like what is your priority with that over having the cohort of third graders moving to so many different locations over a certain number of years. Like knowing what the community's priorities are would probably help us inform our own decisions, because they are the people that these decisions will be affecting. And so some type of survey like you're describing right now, I think would be really helpful.
It sounds like Michaela and Kim should work together with Val to come up with a survey.
Always. Yeah. Great.
It sounds like it. Okay.
So
the meeting's supposed to be over, so.
Well, but to advise on the survey, I wouldn't ask, would you prefer this option over that option, et cetera, so much as what would you prioritize? Do you prioritize time of day, and is it inconvenient to have a shorter or longer day? is travel to a school site as important to you as, rather than put up these scenarios, and we didn't talk about it during the meeting, but all sorts of other things have been heard from and rejected or didn't pan out. St. Jerome's wasn't available, but some other thing might become. We can't put portables down at the racetrack because they want a short-term lease only, sorts of things. I would ask general questions to get people's sentiments about, yes, too many people in our family work, so we cannot do home childcare, so therefore, rather than, oh no, I like 2A better than 3B, those sorts of things.
Yeah, I definitely, if we did the survey, I definitely think that it should be digestible for the community, because if I hadn't been on this board and I saw that was being presented, I would be very lost as to what I was actually, choosing. And so I would think that the survey would look something like, and I know we have to end, so sorry, but one more thing. I would think that the survey would be something to the effect of, would you prefer earlier, start, or would you prefer an AM, PM schedule for your kindergartners? Would you prefer multiple locations for, what are your priorities? But not having it be the different plans, but rather what those plans will affect.
Sounds like you're on the same page.
Okay.
The actual discussion of the survey needs to be at a, agendized for a board meeting, which we're going to do. So we will definitely agendize that and bring it back for full discussion. Charlie and Jacob both want to make a comment?
Well, I just wanted to observe that I think as interested in everybody else as everybody else is in having some input from surveys. I think it's valuable input. I think we should remember that a survey is only as good as the survey itself is, its input. And we shouldn't think of these surveys as being a vote that decides what we do as a board. It's useful input. It may help us identify some issues and concerns that we haven't thought of. When the governor vetoed that particular bill, he said he vetoed it to leave it to the discretion of local school districts to figure out what would work best for that school district. So that's what we need to do, is we need to figure out what works best for this school district, and the survey is useful input. There may be other input that we want to consider.
Thanks. Jacob.
Sounded like Charlie cleared it up a little bit. I was kind of confused as if we're going to do the survey or not for the later start times.
I think
and we are going to do a survey.
Right. But that,
Thank
yes.
you. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yep. And the meeting is adjourned.
10 o'clock?
Not bad at all.